Kum learning a black Gemara. We are up to Daf Chof Amud Aleph in Masechta Sukah. We're having a whole discussion about mats. We made a difference between small mats and large mats. Small mats which are large enough for a person to lie on. We say that stomon the shchiva, and no probability it was meant to be used. No probability is meant to be used as a mattress, and therefore it's mekabel tuma. It's a final product. You cannot use it as chach, but a large one, min hastam, you can use it because it's not used for a mattress. But if you clearly had in mind to use it for chach, it's not an issue. So the Gemara of Chaf and Ralph, right in the middle of the page, Tanur Rabbanan, we learned. Machatzeles, if you happen to have a mat made out of the following materials, shel shafi, v'shel gummy. So these are like reeds. These are things that are so what do you call it? They are they're natural growing. If they're large, then misachim, but these are generally soft. So if they're large, nobody would use it as a mattress, so then you use it as chach. But kitanda, if it's small, ain't misachim, but you shouldn't use it for chach. And the reason is because they're pretty soft, people will use them as a mattress to lie on, and therefore it is forbidden. And however, shalkanim, if it's made out of reeds, which is much tougher, or shalchelis, some other kind of grass that grows next to the water, again, it's thick, then it works like this. Gedula, it's not gedula, what Rashi says, it's gedula. If it's braided together, then it's still very rough, and people would not lie on them. So therefore, I don't care if it's large, even if it's small, people are not going to use it min hastam for a mattress, and therefore you can go ahead and use vaschach. Ba'aruga, if it's woven together, then it's much softer. Then you shouldn't use vaschach because we're assuming that people are going to lie in it. According to some of the Rishonim, it makes no difference if large or small. People will lie in it. Others say only if it's small. However, Rabbi Shmuel but Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says Mishum Aviv, in the name of his father. He says achazu, whether it's braided or achazu, even if it's woven, still pretty tough. Mesachim, but you can use it as chach, because people will not use it as a mattress. V'chein hoya Rab Doisa oimekidvorov. Rab Doisa agrees with him, and Rab Doisa says as well that he agrees that even if it's woven, so it's a bit softer, these reeds, nevertheless, generally people are not going to use it as a mattress, so therefore you can use it as chach. Okay, says the Gemara from the house, so we learned over there, kol ha-chaitzleis, all the chaitzleis. Now, what exactly chaitzleis are, we're going to find out machlekes in the Gemara. So all of these chaitzleis is mitamin tami mes. So we have a tumah called tumas mes, that if it comes in contact with a mace, it becomes a mace is an avi avoisa tumah. So something touches a mace, it becomes an avha tumah. And in order for it to become tummy, it has to be a keli. Then we have another tumah, which is called tumas medris. That is, that if a zov can sit on it, then it takes on the same level of tumah as a zov, and therefore every single thing that is tamei medris can also become tamei mace. But everything that's tamei mace doesn't necessarily mean it can be tamei medris, because a keli, for example, you cannot sit on top of a keli. So you can have you can have things which are tamei mace, but will not be tumas medris. So the Gemara says over here, what do you call it? Kol ha-chaitzes metami tamei mace. All these chaitzes, whatever they are, also see, they do become tamei mace. They all become tamei because they're a keli, and therefore they become tamei. Divrei Rab Doisa, Chacham say no. Chacham say the way we understand right now, they're arguing say it only becomes tumas midras. Chacham say that they can become an avatumah because they can be made for sleeping on. Says the Gemara, tumas medus in tumah meislei. Sounds like Chacham is saying, singling out that the only thing that possibility is to become tummy medus, that a zova sits on it, but not tummy meis. But that's impossible. Well, now then we learn kol hametame medus with tummy meis. Anything which is included in tummy medus automatically is included in tummy meis, because since it's suitable to be a mattress on it, that makes it a keli. It's a completed product. So it surely becomes tamei mace. So the Gemara says, you're right. Amar must say af midas. Must say you're right. It doesn't mean that Chacham not saying exclusively, saying both midas and tamei mace. So Rabbeisa says that they're only tummy mace, these chaitzos, because why? People do not use it to lie on, and therefore does not become tumas midas. And we'll soon see, we're going to compare it back to Sukkah if people do not lie on it. So therefore, it could be used with chach. And the Chachamim say, no, people do lie on it, and therefore it's also tumas midas. So I'm going to ask a question here now. What is chaitzos? What exactly is it? You know what it is? It's a mazule. Okay, it's a mazule. For the mother, so how's that help us? And my mazule, what's a mazule? So the Baba says what they are is mezavle. They're like pouches. They're like pouches to put things inside there, but nevertheless, at the same time, the shepherd can use them, place them under his head as a pillow. That's what it is, mezavle. So the argument is whether it's actually, it's primarily meant to be used to contain things, but can also be used as a pillow. So whether it is tumas midas or not. What Abdei said, it is not. However, Rav Shimon Lakish says, you know what chaitzes is? Chaitzes is the same word as machtelis. Chaitzes means a mat, like we learned before. And if it's a mat, the Abdei is saying that that a mat is not used as a mattress, and therefore it's not mekabel tumas midras, only tumas tummy mace. The other Rish Lakish made Rashoshki says, you, the Rish Lakish made an interesting comment. One he says, Hareini kaparas, let me be the atonement for Chiyabanu. And he says that they did the dirty part I've taken upon myself. And Rashi says that this is a lotion of covered. Whenever you say you mention your Rebbe, your father's name, you say Hareini kaparas mishkaveh. Shulchan says you say that the first 12 months. You say Hareini kaparas mishkaveh, Reb Chia ubanav shebetchila. All the way in the beginning of time, when people forgot certain dinim is Ola Ezra Bavel. Came along Ezra from Bavel, the Yosta, and he brought him back. Now, it couldn't mean over here also because in it, Israel, he knew nothing. If you look in the Chemia, the Periches, and Tess, he didn't even know what a Shana was in Kippur or Sukkot. So there can mean literally the people in Israel forgot the Torah, and Ezra brought the Torah back to them. Okay, but then again they forgot certain dinim. We had psachim there whereby they didn't know Pesach falls out on Shabbos. Can they or can they not? All the Hillel Babli each other came along. Hillel Babli, Hillel was from Bavel, and he became the Nasi because the Ben Seder abdicated the position because they realized they didn't know the halacha of that din. And Teisha says that they went. When he says Allah, he went early because Hillel learned B'Shmai B'Talion, the story we had in Sech Yuma, how he sat there, on top of the skylight and all that. So that's when he went from Bavel. And then he says over here further, the Gemara then says again, all the Reb Chia they forgot it again. All the Reb Chia and came and established it. Now this part here, Rashi unfortunately don't explain exactly what happened here, but very difficult to understand what happened. What was forgotten at the times of Chia? We don't know anything. The mother was forgotten, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was there with all the Tanoim. What do you mean Rabbi Chia and Bonim came and they've established it? What exactly was forgotten then? The Hill we know, the Ezra we know. What do we know about Rabbi Chia? What halachas were forgotten and what the halacha Rabbi Chia bring it back? We'll have in Mark Silvus we say. But that they would go around to all the towns and teach Torah. So it maybe means that like had like a school system where they started the first shluchim. They would go everywhere in Israel and make sure they had schools and they had shiurim. So maybe that's what it means. Around the regions, they made sure that everybody was learning. And says as follows. Says as follows. When it comes to the mats that are produced in the city of Lusha, there's definitely no argument. Shehein metamas, they are metame. Why? Because they are much softer, and they used to use those. They used to use the ones in Lusha to sleep on. So therefore, obviously, it's tumas midas. Vishatveria over there is much rougher. Shehein toilet because nobody would use them as a mattress. Where they argue, all other regions. People generally do not sit in that. Is is like we treat it like Tveria, and therefore it's not metame, and that's Rabbeisa. It's not tumas midras. And interesting, we said the leka the yossi, you don't sit on it when you actually the criteria is sleeping. Umar Sava, another one says kiva de mikri, it happens by chance. No, you're right. Generally, it's not done that way, but by chance, the yossi line said it kiddush like usha. It's like usha. Amar, you said before, Kol HaChaitzes Metame Tame Meis. You said before that all the Chaitzes are Metame Tame Meis, but not Tumas Midas, because when Machzelas, people don't sleep on. But Tanya, we learned V'chein Hoya Rabdeisa Eimekidvarov. It says Rabdeisa said that Rabdeisa followed Rabbi Yasi, that you could use them as chach. And if you can use them as chach, it's not just that people don't sleep on them, it's not even a keli. You're telling me, Rabdeisa here says that definitely becomes tummy mace. Forget about the tumas midas. If it becomes tummy mace, it has to be a keli. So how can Rabdeisa say you can use mats as chach at all? Forget the problem about sleeping on it. The fact is that it's a keli. And if it's a keli, that's mekabel tumas mace, it can no longer be used as chach. How do you reconcile these two then? Like kasha, it's not a question. We're not talking about the same product. How do you get down for when do we say it's treated like a keli and it's mekabel tumas mace if it has over there a rim all around it? It has a border all around it, so therefore you can place things in there and contain it. Just mamash keli, so it's mekabel tumas mace, and that taka you cannot use on your sukkah for schach. How the less you get down for it, but if it has no perimeter around it. If it has no perimeter around it, so then it's not a keli, and therefore that can be used for schach because people don't sleep on it, nor is it a keli. So two different things. Meisha, ask another question. It says, if you have chaitzolos sham, if you have chaitzolos of sham or gemi, again, these are things that that grow near the water shell, and they're pretty tough. Shall sack. If you have it made out of sack, we learned before that's feathers of a goat, the wool of a goat. Vishel sfida, or the horsehair. All of these are metame tummy mace. They're all metame tummy mace. No, they're not tumas medas because they don't really sleep on them, but they are metame tummy mace. But they are a keli. Divir Abdeisa. Abdeisa says they're a keli, but they're not something to sleep on. The Chum say af medas. The Chum say no. That these things are also you can sleep on it, so therefore it's also mekabazov since it becomes tummy. Now, Bishlan Mandama, the one who says Marzuvli, the one who says that it's like these pouches. That's what cholzes means. It's a marzuli. So I can tell you that all of these materials, if it's made out of sham or shalgemi, it's not something you sleep on, but it's nevertheless it can be a keli. How can it be a keli? Because you can have other uses for it. For example, it's a pouch. The pedi, even though it has big gaps and everything else, you can store in there large fruits. Shal sak was made out of the horsehair, was made out of the sack, made out of the feathers or the wool of a goat. Chazi, it's also suitable. It is suitable for a golki and vitzani also to contain in it, smaller fruits. Okay, so it's worth something. You can put in there, as actually you put in there legumes, you can put in there very small fruits, because the holes are tiny. Okay, so therefore, you don't sleep on them, so there's no tumas midras, but it is a keli, because you can put things inside them. We're talking about a mat. We're talking about a mat. How's it a keli? It's the case of the wool of a goat or the hair of a horse. I can tell you, chazi liparsi. It is suitable to be a partition. So it comes out from here, or vinafis, or it could be also like a bellows. So what we see from here is a very important halacha we learn out that if you buy general mats, even though they're not made to be a mat to sleep on, but they're made to be blinds. They're made to be a partition, or as Rashi is a villain, which is basically a curtain. It is you cannot use it for schach. That adds to the layer of the problem of buying stam mats. What is the real purpose for it? But the materials made out of sham and made out of gezri. Skip the line, didn't I? The one that says matzolas mamish. What? You can tell me it's a keli. Why is it a keli? It's made out of sacred spirit. I can tell you it's a keli. Why? Because it's used. Used as a curtain over naf, so it's used as a sieve. It's used as to filter things through it. Ella shall sham shall gemi. If it's made out of sham and out of miracle and gemi lemay chazi, what can you do with it? What can you do with it? So Gemara says, you know what you can do with it? Chazu linziasa. It can be used as a lid. It can be used as a lid. And therefore, that makes it a keli. The fact that it can be used as a lid. Says the Gemara, so okay, therefore it's a keli, but not something that people sleep on. That's a binyan of Deisa. Says the Gemara, so it's covered barrels. In other words, it's just the opposite. Means mats, shel shamba, shel gemi. Okay, chazon. You can use it for a lid. Shel sakva, shel the goat here and the horse here. Chazon the parsa, it's suitable for a curtain, or a nafsa for a sip. The other opinion says marzula, that is like a pouch. Bishlema shel sakva shel speda from the hairs. Chazi, because of tiny holes. Leguki, that sun, you can use it for legumes, you can use it for small fruits. Ela shel shama shel gemi, when the holes are massive. My chazu, what in the world can you use it for? As the Gemara, chazu lekinta de peda, use it for very large fruits. So therefore we explained how chaitzos can be considered a keli because it can contain things inside it, but it cannot be considered. It's not suitable for lying on, and therefore it does not attract tumas midras. Tanya, we learned. Amar Chananya said. Chananya said. When he went to exile, he went to exile to do Iber Shana. So he said, when I went to exile, Rashi said, this is the nephew of Rabbi Yeshua. When I went to exile, Matzos, found talking to an old man. He told me, you know what? You're allowed to make schach out of budya, out of mats. But when I went to Rabbi Yeshua, my uncle, what if he actually agreed? You can make it out of mats. Would Leslie get down? When can you make it out of mats if there's no rim? So it's not a keli. We're talking about mats that people don't sleep on, but the problem is a keli, as I said before, it doesn't have a rim. So therefore no border, and therefore it doesn't contain anything inside. It's not a keli. These mats from the play of Mechuzah, Ilmole, had it not been for Kir, Shalahan, had not been for the fact that it has this rim all around it, we can use it for schach. But now we can because it has this rim all around it. You can use mats, but if it has a border around it, ain mesachim, and you cannot use it anymore. Hadin haloch sukkah. Okay, starting now the second pedic. If somebody sleeps under a bed, the sukkah, which we had a whole discussion before, and if you regarding sleeping under a bed, you're not yotze because you're not lying under the schach, you're lying under an oil which is above your head. Rashi says here, interesting. The question is, what do you mean yotze? Just say you have a chayv to sleep in sukkah. Just say you didn't fulfill your mitzvah of sukkah. So Rashi says you should know that ikar yeshivas sukkah, the primary mitzvah of sukkah is achila, shtia, v'sheina, eating, drinking, and sleeping. So if you do any other activity in the sukkah under the bed, we would never use the word you're not yotzei chavas. You don't have a chayv to do it. Just you didn't do the mitzvah of sukkah. But these three things, so Rashi holds clearly that achila, shtia, and sheina, all three, is the ikar of a sukkah. So how come we don't make a bracha on sleeping in a sukkah, if that's the ikar of a sukkah? So generally you have two answers. One answer is Taisus and brachas. I think if you're alpha base, what Taisus says we're scared, just like if you don't make a bracha when you go to sleep, it's scared that you're not going to fall asleep. So too, he says you're scared that if you don't fall asleep, you make bracha vatala. So we don't make a bracha on sleeping. Tam says the ikar is eating, and the eating automatically includes all your other activities that you do in the sukkah. So that's why the Shulchan says, Al-Rebbe says that if you go to someone else's sukkah, then even for Arai and all that, you're just walking in, you have to make a bracha already, because in your own sukkah, the main bracha is the meal, so therefore that bracha covers everything, all your other activities. It doesn't help you when you go to another sukkah. Amar Rabbi says, we had a custom, I disagree. We used to sleep under the bed. We used to sleep under the bed before the older people. Nobody said a word. In other words, you are allowed to sleep under a bed because the bed is an oil arai, and the oil arai, a temporary cover, does not cancel out the permanent cover, which is the sukkah. Relative to the sukkah, the bed is temporary. I disagree with you. I'll prove to you wrong. Under a bed, actually, you're not yotze. Tavi, the servant of Gamliel, he used to sleep under a bed. Gamliel made a comment. Just stop talking. He said, "Look at my servant here, Tavi. He's a Talmud Chacham. We had more humor that there were others suitable, but Tavi was unique." He knew that servants, that slaves are exempt from a sukkah. Leficha, what did he do? Yoshin hu tachas amita. He slept under the bed because he's a Talmud Chacham and he knew that he's potter, so therefore he went under the bed. So on the contrary, the fact that Tavi went under the bed proves that there is no mitzvah being fulfilled when you're under the bed, and that's why Tavi went under the bed. Tavi was like Eved has the same laws like a woman, and a woman is exempt from sukkah, so too he was exempt from sukkah. Well, the feedback came to Lamadu, the way we're learning now, we also understood. He was just having small talk, talking about he's so proud of his servant. But what we gleaned from what he said was that really you're not yates if you're under the bed, and therefore Tavi was went under the bed. So why did he stay there at all? He wanted to hear the divrei Torah, what's going on. Says the Gemara. A bed requires 10, oil requires 10 tvachim, and you don't have 10 tvachim over there. So a tiger's rule, 10 tvachim. In order for the bed to be an oil to obstruct or to cancel out the oil of the sukkah, the bed has to be 10 tvachim. The argument in Mefarshim is this is only according to Shmuel. Remember, we had an argument for sukkah, tablet sukkah, whether it has to be 10 tvachim above, 4 tvachim, or 1 tefach. Shmuel says 10. So the same thing applies here, or maybe here it's different. The bed is fixed in the ground. Maybe I'm not trying to establish another sukkah. Maybe everyone agrees that you need 10 tvachim before it cancels out the proper sukkah. Second, we learned over there. We learned that if you have one thing under the din of oil, so you have a kazayis, let's say, of a mace in one end of the room, and you have kalim on the other end of the room. The roof, since they share a common roof, the tumah gets transported from one end of the room to the other end of the room. So we learned over there, we learned over there, whether you have when you have a hole that's carved out by water, so it's naturally carved out by water, and so now you have a tunnel there, and you have a roof, and you have things on the one end of the roof, and you have something coming on the other end of the roof. It gets transported. Or let's say the hole was carved out by shiratim. So let's say the salt from the water that caused all these tunnels. Let's say you have a pile of stones, but it's like a triangle. You have 2 stones on the bottom, and then you have a gap, and you have 1 larger stone on top. So again, you have things under one part of the stone, another part of the stone. Likewise, same thing. We have, let's say, beams piled on top of each other, piled up, ready to for construction, and there's a lot of gaps in between. And then you have, let's say, 2 beams on the bottom holding up 1 beam on top. And therefore, if you put a kazayis of a mace on one end and there's something else keli on the other end, it retracts tumah because they're all sharing the same roof. Is ma'ilal tumah. All of these are also an oil, and the idea of these things are most of them are natural. The beams, let's say, are not natural, but you didn't think about being a roof. You just happened to put it down. The other ones, nobody put it down. It's not so they shemayim. It's natural events. The currents came in, washed away, dug out these holes. Nevertheless, anything which looks like an oil can be described as an oil. It has all the din of an oil. He disagrees. He says, "Kol oil shein also the adam." If it's not man-made, ain't oil. It does not have the status of an oil. My time did Rabbi Yehuda. Why did Rabbi Yehuda believe that an oil has to be only man-made? Because Yal, if he learns out, oil mimishkan. He learns out the word oil we find by Tumen Pasha Chukas, and we find the word oil in the Mishkan, so we compare it to the Mishkan. Siv hachazais hatoyda adam ki yamas ba'oil. Says here by paraduma. Somebody's tummy to sprinkle him. It's 7 days and all that. It said the word oil. Siv hasam, and by when it comes to this to the Mishkan, it says by yifresh as oil ala Mishkan. So we find the same word oil. And what do we know over there? Malahal adam has to be man-made. Avkam the adam also has to be man-made. Rabbanon, oil. There's so many times in the Pasha Chukas, in the beginning, where he mentioned the word oil, the fact that it mentions so many times, I tell you, regardless of how it formed as an oil, it has the status of an oil. So what Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda holds, call oil she'ein os the other main oil. You tell me Rabbi Yehuda holds that any oil which is not man-made is not an oil. Let me ask you a question, a very interesting thing. But Aminu we learned. So because when it came to the kohen who was going to prepare the for the ashes for the paraduma, to make mechatas, all that. So we took a lot of precautions, but we did one leniency. We did because the Dukim said that the kohen who does this cannot be a tavuya, and it means if somebody already was stomach went to the mikveh and has to wait till sunset, he's known as a tavuya, so he cannot be metame chulin, but he can metame truma and make it a shlishi because he has a status of a sheni. So they wanted to say that the Tzuk wanted to say that he should not be involved in the paraduma, but Chum hold he could. So therefore, they deliberately set out to be metame this kohen, and then he should go to mikveh, and then he has to wait for Erev Shemesh. On the other hand, they took a lot of precautions. So some of the precautions were as follows in the preparation. Whatever they could do. But some of the precautions were as follows. They used to build chatzedus hayabenuyas b'Yerushalayim. They built courtyards in Yerushalayim al gabe asela. They found these giant rocks, or a ground that wasn't. There's no soil. They're just a massive one piece of rock that was always there, in a natural state. And the tachteim cholo, and they would make sure they would build a house on it or houses on it, and they made sure there was a gap between the rock. In other words, we know that nobody was buried. The idea of this rock is nobody was buried underneath, really, because the rock was always there. Nevertheless, they built on the rock with tachteim cholo, and beneath them there was a big. In other words, they raised where the houses were, because we learned they built like a floor, and we learned before that if there's a space, a gap of a tefach, that forms as a roof, and it prevents the tumah from rising up. So this is like an extra precaution, because if the rock was never moved, why you even think that there's anything buried underneath it? But nevertheless, they raised the ground more than a tefach, and so that if anything is there, the tumah will be trapped and won't go up. And why the worry? They kaver hatohim, because we learned in Psachim about a kaver that no one in the world knows about. That's called kaver hatohim, a kaver that's subterranean, and we want to make sure that if there is there, it's not going to cause any tumah to the people above. Somebody might have been buried there. Nobody in the world knows about it. If anybody knows about it, it's no longer kaver hatohim. So we're right there. One of the precautions they take. So this raises unbelievable chumrah. First of all, they found the rocks of pashtas, nobody's buried underneath it. And then, even if somebody's buried underneath that, we raised the floor by another tefach. So that's like a real chumrah. Then went further. Umevi and nashim ubrus, they bring these pregnant women, so the baby inside them is totally tahor. The yoled sham, and they give birth living on top of this area. Umegadlus b'neim sham, must have had shiurim and classes and everything else, but they used to raise the kids there till the age of around 7 or 8 before they were able to see any kedi. So they charred themselves and never became tummy. Lepara, and why in the world did they do all this? To prepare it for the paraduma. They wanted to make sure that everything that's prepared should be in a best possible way, that nobody should be tummy. And what they did was, and you have to bring water and all that. So what they did was, they would have to take the kids to bring water, and they didn't want the kids to become tummy. So they were taught all these years, but now you have to leave their environs to go to a well somewhere and pick up the water. So Mevi and Shavadi, they would bring these big oxen, the alga and on top of them, also they would place a door across. So the kid, so any tumah that's on the ground would be, the door would act like a roof and prevent the tumah from going any further. The kid was on top of the door. The tinoik is yesh al gabein, the kid was on top of that. The koisa shall ever be them. They used cups made out of stone. Again, that's not makabel tumah. And then higi al shaloyah. They came to the man shaloyah. Yoru lechamayim. That since they didn't use a rope or anything else, they had to physically go. This is how Rashi learns. Taisa disagrees. They had to physically go off the cow and raise the water. So the cow went into the water, and they went in and drew water on these stones, these cups made out of stones. And they filled it up. They went back up on the cow. The Yoshlam, they sat there. So that's what all the precautions they took just to bring the water. Rabbi Yasi says no, they didn't have to get off the oxen. They sat on the cow, and they would lower a rope. And they would fill up and they fill the water. And why was all this done? They did all this because of the kaver hatoim. That maybe there's something, again, somebody buried there, and we don't know about. And the idea, according to Rabbi Yasi, is even more machmer. He didn't let the child get off the cow. He said, "Child, you stay on the cow when you sit on the door, and just lower with a rope, in case there's something there in the water." Comes along with Tanya Rabbi Yehuda. This is what our question is. Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says, "Lahoi Mevin Dalsa." They bring doors. Ela Shvarim. They just had wide cows, had a very wide bottom, so the kid could sit on the cow, and even though his legs were suspended sideways, the cow would be blocking him from overhanging and hovering above the ground. We're talking about little kids here. The idea is that the shayt itself became the oil that would impede any tumah from going upwards, rising. Now, the obvious question is, Yehuda just told us that natural mechitzas are not a mechitza, natural roofs are not a roof. The cow is a natural thing, so how can that serve as an oil to protect, to keep the tumah underneath the cow rather than rising to the child? According to Yehuda. Well, shvarim, the oil shayna also, the other move, shvarim are an oil that's not man-made. Luktani, and we learned that Yehuda said they didn't bring cows, they didn't bring doors, they only used the oxen. Says the Gemara, ki asar abdimi amar abelazar moide Yehuda's moide kimale egrav. Yehuda's moide, when he said that natural oil is not an oil if it's very small, but if it's larger than a tefach, the size of a fist, of a person that had a very large fist. If it's the size of a fist, Rabbi Yehuda is made that even though it's not man-made, it's natural. Nevertheless, it is considered an oil. These cows are much larger than an egref and the size of a large fist, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda is made that sometimes natural oil is a valid oil where it's large. Okay, we'll stop over here and we'll continue tomorrow. The